The stars look different out here, Captain Jake Miller thought as he stood on the bridge of the new frontier. 3 months they had been traveling through deep space, further from Earth than any human had ever gone before. The mission was simple on paper but complex in reality: explore new star systems, make contact with alien life if they found it, and report back to Earth Command with their findings. Jake had been chosen for this mission not just because of his military record, but because of his ability to stay calm under pressure. At 38 years old, he had seen combat in the Mars colonies and survived the asteroid mining disasters that killed hundreds of other spacers. His brown hair was starting to show gray at the temples, and his weathered face told the story of someone who had spent years in space, dealing with problems that would have broken lesser men. The bridge crew was small but experienced. Navigation Officer Lisa Carter sat at her station, monitoring long-range sensors with the focus of someone who knew that one mistake could strand them light years from home. She was 29, with short blonde hair and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing on her displays. Next to her, weapons specialist Danny Rodriguez checked and rechecked their defense systems, his dark eyes constantly scanning for threats. At 26, Danny was the youngest of the senior crew, but Jake had seen him handle impossible situations with the kind of steady nerves that only came from growing up in the rough neighborhoods of New Angeles. Chief Engineer Amy Brooks worked below decks, keeping their experimental faster-than-light drive running smoothly. She was 34, red-haired and brilliant, with a reputation for making broken technology work through sheer determination and creative problem-solving. Jake trusted her completely to keep them moving through the void between stars. They had been monitoring radio signals for weeks, looking for signs of intelligent life. When the first alien transmissions reached their sensors, the entire crew felt a mixture of excitement and fear. This was what they had come for, but it also meant they were no longer alone in the universe. The signals came from a star system 2 days away at their current speed. Lisa worked around the clock to decode the transmissions while Danny prepared their weapon systems just in case. Amy pushed their engines harder than she probably should have, eager to make history as part of humanity's first contact with alien life. When they finally arrived in the system, Jake felt his heart skip a beat. 6 massive ships hung in space near the 4th planet, each one larger than anything humans had ever built. The ships were sleek and angular, covered in what looked like crystalline armor that reflected the light of the local star. They were beautiful in a way that human ships never were, designed by minds that thought differently about form and function. The alien ships noticed the new frontier immediately. Within minutes of their arrival, Jake received a transmission on standard radio frequencies. The voice that came through their speakers was cold and mechanical, clearly using some kind of translation device. Unknown vessel, you have entered territory claimed by the Zephyrian Empire. State your origin and purpose, or be destroyed. Jake looked at his crew. Lisa nodded from her station, indicating she was recording everything. Danny had his hands on the weapons controls, though they all knew their single ship would last about 30 seconds against the alien fleet. Amy's voice came through the intercom from engineering, reporting that their engines were ready for emergency. Jump if needed. This is Captain Jake Miller of the human vessel New Frontier, he replied, keeping his voice steady. We come from the planet Earth in peaceful exploration. We mean no harm and request diplomatic contact. There was a long pause before the alien voice responded. Humans, from the 3rd planet of the Sol System. We have observed your world from a distance. You will prepare to receive a boarding party for inspection and processing. Jake felt a chill run down his spine at the word processing. That did not sound like standard diplomatic procedure. We would prefer to meet in neutral space or aboard one of your vessels for formal first contact protocols. Another pause, then what might have been alien laughter. Your preferences are irrelevant. You are from a death world, barely surviving, on a planet that kills most life forms. The Empire offers you salvation through service. Prepare for boarding or be destroyed. Lisa looked up from her station with wide eyes. Captain, they're moving toward us, all 6 ships. Danny gripped his controls tighter. Sir, our weapons won't even scratch their hulls. Jake thought quickly. These aliens seemed to know about Earth, but they clearly misunderstood what they were dealing with. They thought humans were desperate refugees from a hostile world, eager to be saved by a superior civilization. That gave him an idea. Zephyrian Fleet, this is Captain Miller. We are honored by your offer of salvation and would like to discuss terms. However, as representatives of our species, we request a formal meeting with your commander to ensure proper protocols are followed. The pause was shorter this time. Very well, your desperation is understood. You and one advisor will be transported to our command vessel. Any attempt at deception or violence will result in the destruction of your ship and crew. Jake turned to his first officer, Lieutenant Commander Kevin Walsh. Kevin was 35, built like a wrestler with the kind of calm demeanor that came from years of special operations work before joining the space service. His black hair was cut military short, and his gray eyes held the steady gaze of someone who had seen combat and survived. Kevin, you're with me, Jake said quietly. Lisa, maintain communications with Earth Command, but don't send anything until we return. Danny, keep weapons powered but hidden. Amy, be ready to jump us out of here in 30 seconds if things go wrong. The alien transport beam was unlike anything they had experienced. Jake felt his body dissolve into energy and reform on the deck of the Zephyrian command ship. The sensation was unsettling but not painful. Kevin appeared beside him, looking around with the practiced eye of a soldier, assessing potential threats and escape routes. The interior of the alien ship was as impressive as its exterior. High ceilings stretched overhead, supported by crystalline pillars that seemed to grow from the deck itself. The walls were covered in displays showing star charts, ship status readings, and what looked like tactical information about dozens of different star systems. But what caught Jake's attention were the other aliens in the chamber. Not all of them were Zephyrians. He saw at least 4 different species, all wearing what appeared to be uniforms or formal dress indicating subservient status. These were not allies of the Zephyrians, Jake realized. These were conquered peoples. 2 tall Zephyrian guards escorted Jake and Kevin through corridors that seemed designed to intimidate. The crystalline beings stood nearly 7 feet tall, their bodies translucent and angular, with faces that were beautiful and alien at the same time. They moved with fluid grace, but Jake could see the strength in their limbs and the weapons integrated into their armor. They were brought to a vast chamber that was clearly designed for ceremony and display. Dozens of alien representatives from various species stood along the walls, all watching the humans with mixtures of curiosity and pity. At the center of the room, behind a massive metal table, stood the largest Zephyrian Jake had seen yet. I am Fleet Commander Veltar, the alien said, his translated voice echoing through the chamber. I welcome the representatives of the human species to salvation under the protection of the Zephyrian Empire. Fleet Commander Veltar moved with the flowing grace that seemed natural to all Zephyrians, his crystalline body catching the light from overhead fixtures and casting rainbow patterns on the chamber walls. Jake noticed how the other alien species in the room immediately straightened when Veltar spoke, their body language showing clear submission to the Zephyrian leader. Your arrival here is most fortunate, Veltar continued, gesturing with one long arm toward holographic displays that materialized in the air around them. We have been observing your homeworld for several of your years, studying the impossible conditions under which your species attempts to survive. The first hologram showed Earth from space, blue and white and beautiful. But as Jake watched, the display zoomed in to show massive hurricanes swirling across ocean surfaces, their winds powerful enough to level entire cities. The image shifted to show volcanic eruptions spewing lava and ash into the atmosphere, then earthquakes splitting the ground into deadly chasms. Observe the violence of your world, Veltar said, his tone carrying what Jake interpreted as sympathy. Storms with winds that exceed 300 kilometers per hour. Temperatures that range from -40 degrees to +60 degrees. Atmospheric pressure changes that would crush the bodies of most civilized species. Kevin stood beside Jake, his face carefully neutral as he watched the display. Jake knew his first officer was cataloging every detail of the chamber, noting guard positions and potential escape routes while appearing to focus on the Zephyrian presentation. The holographic display shifted again, showing Earth's wildlife. Jake saw lions hunting zebras across African plains, great white sharks attacking seals in churning ocean waters, and grizzly bears catching salmon in Alaskan rivers. To human eyes, these were normal scenes of nature, but Jake could hear gasps and sounds of distress from the other alien species watching. "The predators of your world," Valtar explained, "are unlike anything found on civilized planets. Creatures that hunt and kill with savage efficiency, that show no mercy to the weak or injured. Your species has somehow survived among these monsters, constantly fighting for resources and safety." A smaller Zephyrian, wearing different colored armor that indicated lower rank, stepped forward with what appeared to be a data tablet. "Commander, our biological analysis indicates that humans require massive amounts of calories and water daily just to maintain basic functions. They're primitive. Bodies are inefficient and wasteful compared to more evolved species." Veltar nodded approvingly. "Indeed, your people clearly struggle with basic survival on your harsh world. The atmospheric composition alone would be toxic to most of our subject species. 21% oxygen creates a highly combustible environment that leads to frequent fires and explosions." Jake almost smiled at that comment, but kept his expression serious. The Zephyrians had obviously done their research, but they were interpreting everything through the lens of their own limitations. What they saw as impossible survival conditions, humans saw as home. The holographic display now showed human cities, but the focus was on disasters and emergencies. Jake watched footage of firefighters running into burning buildings, rescue workers pulling survivors from collapsed structures after earthquakes, and Coast Guard crews launching boats into hurricane-driven seas to save people from sinking ships. "Your species shows remarkable desperation," Valtar observed, "constantly risking death to save others, throwing away lives in futile gestures of heroism. This behavior indicates a species driven to madness by the constant stress of survival on a death world." Around the chamber, representatives from other conquered species nodded in agreement. Jake noticed they all looked well-fed and comfortable, wearing fine clothing and jewelry that suggested the Zephyrians treated their subjects reasonably well once they submitted to imperial rule. A tall, thin alien with gray skin and large black eyes stepped forward slightly. Jake guessed this was one of the subject species leaders, allowed to witness this meeting as an example of how surrendering to the Zephyrians led to a better life. "When the Zephyrian Empire first contacted my people on Kalos Prime," the gray alien said, "we also believed we could resist. Our world had challenges too. Though nothing like the horrors you face on Earth, we learned that accepting imperial protection brought peace and prosperity we had never known." Another alien, this one shorter with blue-tinted skin and 4 arms, nodded in agreement. "The hegemony of Titan attempted to maintain independence when the Empire arrived in our system. The resulting conflict cost millions of lives before our leaders accepted the wisdom of surrender. Under imperial rule, such violence is no longer necessary." Veltar gestured approvingly at his subject species representatives. "You see the wisdom of those who came before you. Each species brought into the Empire initially resisted, believing they could maintain their primitive independence. All eventually recognized that survival required accepting the protection and guidance of a superior civilization." The holographic display changed again, showing technical readouts of human technology. Jake saw images of their newest spacecraft, their most advanced weapons, and their best medical equipment. But the display highlighted the limitations of each system, comparing them unfavorably to Zephyrian equivalents. "Your fastest ships require months to travel distances our vessels cover in days," Veltar noted. "Your weapons are crude chemical and kinetic systems that would be ineffective against modern energy shields. Your medical technology cannot even prevent the aging process that kills your people after mere decades of life." Kevin shifted slightly beside Jake, and Jake caught the subtle hand signal his first officer made. Kevin had identified at least 6 possible exit routes from the chamber, though Jake doubted they would be able to use any of them if things went wrong. However, Veltar continued, his tone becoming more formal, the Empire recognizes that survival on a Deathworld requires certain useful traits. Your species has developed physical resilience and primitive cunning that could serve Imperial needs. With proper guidance and relocation to safer worlds, humans could become productive members of Imperial society. The fleet commander gestured to the data tablet held by his subordinate. We have prepared relocation sites on 17 different worlds within the Empire. These planets have stable climates, abundant resources, and no dangerous predators. Your people would be fed, housed, and protected while learning to contribute to Imperial civilization. Jake looked around the chamber at the other alien species, noting how they all seemed genuinely happy with their situations. These were not oppressed slaves, he realized, but willing subjects who had chosen security over independence. The Zephyrians were not evil conquerors, but paternalistic rulers who genuinely believed they were saving lesser species from themselves that made this situation much more complex than a simple invasion scenario. These aliens truly believed they were offering humanity salvation from an impossible world, and they had the track record to prove that their other subjects were better off under Imperial rule. The formal surrender ceremony is a simple process, Veltar explained, moving to stand behind the metal table at the center of the chamber. You will sign documents acknowledging Earth as an Imperial protectorate, and we will begin the process of evacuating your population to suitable worlds. The transition will take several years, but we are patient. The holographic displays faded, leaving the chamber lit only by the crystalline pillars and ceiling fixtures. Jake could feel the expectant attention of everyone present as they waited for his response to this generous offer of salvation. Fleet Commander Veltar folded his long arms and looked down at the 2 humans with what Jake interpreted as benevolent authority. We understand this is overwhelming for representatives of a primitive species. Take whatever time you need to process our offer, though I assure you the alternative is watching your people slowly die on that impossible world you call home. Jake stood quietly for a long moment, letting the weight of Fleet Commander Veltar's words settle in the chamber. Around him, the representatives of conquered species watched with expressions that mixed pity and encouragement. They had all been in the same position once, facing the choice between impossible independence and comfortable surrender. The silence stretched until it became uncomfortable for everyone except Jake and Kevin. Both humans had learned patience in situations where saying the wrong thing could get people killed. They waited while the aliens grew more nervous, fidgeting in ways that suggested this was not the immediate gratitude they had expected. Finally, Jake stepped forward toward the metal table where Fleet Commander Veltar stood waiting. His boots made soft sounds on the crystalline floor, echoes that seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet chamber. Kevin moved with him, staying slightly behind and to the right in a position that gave him clear sight lines to all the exits. Fleet Commander Veltar, Jake said, his voice calm and respectful, I appreciate the time and effort your people have put into studying humanity and Earth. Your presentation was very thorough. Veltar's crystalline features shifted in what might have been satisfaction. We pride ourselves on understanding the species we encounter. Proper analysis ensures that integration into the Empire proceeds smoothly for everyone involved. Jake nodded thoughtfully. I can see that your other subjects have benefited greatly from Imperial protection. They look healthy and prosperous. He gestured toward the alien representatives around the chamber, many of whom straightened with obvious pride at the compliment. Indeed, Veltar agreed. The Kallusi were dying from atmospheric poisoning when we found them. The Titanians were destroying their own world through primitive industrial practices. The Nexari were facing extinction from solar radiation increases. All now thrive under Imperial guidance. The gray-skinned Kallusi representative stepped forward eagerly. Captain Miller, my people's population has doubled since joining the Empire. Our children grow up without fear of toxic storms or resource wars. The peace we have found is beyond anything we achieved through independence. Jake looked at the alien with genuine interest. How long did it take your people to adapt to life on Imperial worlds? 3 generations, the Kalasi replied proudly. My grandchildren have never known the terror of our homeworld's poisoned skies. They study Imperial science and contribute to projects that benefit species across dozens of star systems. The blue-skinned Titanian representative nodded in agreement. The transition period was difficult, but Imperial educators helped us understand why our old ways were destructive. Now our engineers work alongside Zephyrian masters to build better worlds for everyone. Jake walked slowly around the metal table, appearing to consider everything he had heard. Kevin moved to maintain his position relative to his captain while keeping watch on the Zephyrian guards positioned around the chamber's perimeter. These are remarkable success stories, Jake said finally. Your empire clearly knows how to help struggling species build better lives. He paused next to Fleet. Commander Veltar looking up at the tall crystalline being. But I have one question that's been bothering me since we arrived. Veltar's head tilted slightly in what appeared to be curiosity. Of course. We expect primitive species to have difficulty understanding Imperial policies at first. Ask whatever concerns you. Jake's expression remained polite and interested, showing no hint of what was coming next. You've studied Earth extensively and documented all the dangers that make it a death world. The storms, the predators, the temperature extremes, the toxic atmosphere, all of it. Correct, Veltar confirmed. Your world is among the most hostile environments we have encountered. That your species survived at all is remarkable? Jake nodded slowly. Right, and you've observed that humans constantly risk their lives in dangerous situations, fighting fires, rescuing people from disasters, going into combat against impossible odds? Evidence of desperation and madness brought on by Deathworld conditions, Veltar said with what sounded like sympathy. Such behavior is clearly the result of psychological trauma from living in constant mortal danger. Around the chamber, the other alien representatives murmured agreement. They had all heard similar explanations when their own worlds were analyzed for Imperial integration. Jake stopped walking and turned to face Fleet Commander Veltar directly. So let me make sure. I understand your logic. You've identified Earth as an impossibly dangerous death world where nothing should be able to survive. You've documented that humans regularly engage in activities that would kill members of any civilized species. And from this, you concluded that we're desperate refugees who need to be rescued. That is correct, Veltar said, though his tone carried a slight note of uncertainty at Jake's phrasing. Jake was quiet for another moment, his expression thoughtful. When he finally spoke, his voice was still calm but carried a new edge that made Kevin tense slightly in preparation. Surrender to who? The question hung in the air like a physical presence. It was not phrased as a question but delivered as a flat statement that somehow managed to convey complete contempt. Veltar blinked in confusion. I do not understand the meaning of your words. Jake's demeanor shifted in that instant from respectful diplomat to something far more dangerous. His posture straightened, his shoulders squared, and his eyes hardened into the cold stare of a predator evaluating prey. You call Earth a death world because of storms that would tear apart your ships, Jake said, his voice dropping to a lower register that carried clearly through the silent chamber. Temperature extremes that would freeze your blood solid or boil it in your veins. Atmospheric pressure that would crush your delicate bodies into crystalline dust. The Zephyrian guards around the chamber began to shift nervously, sensing the change in the human captain's attitude even if they did not understand its implications. You documented creatures on our world that hunt and kill with what you called savage efficiency, Jake continued, taking a step closer to Veltar. Predators that show no mercy to the weak, that fight for territory and resources with violence. That terrifies your civilized minds. Veltar backed up slightly, his crystalline features showing the first signs of alarm. Captain Miller, perhaps we should discuss terms more formally. But here's what your extensive research missed. Jake sighed, ignoring the fleet commander's attempt to redirect the conversation. The most dangerous predator on that Deathworld isn't the storms that could destroy your fleet. It's not the temperature swings that would kill your people in minutes. It's not even the savage creatures you're so afraid of. Kevin had moved into position near the chamber's main exit, his casual stance hiding the fact that he was ready to disable the guards there in seconds if necessary. The other alien representatives were beginning to look confused and worried as they sensed the shift in atmosphere. Jake reached out faster than any of the Zephyrians could react and grabbed Fleet Commander Veltar by the prominent crystalline crest that crowned his head. Before anyone in the chamber could move or speak, Jake slammed the alien's face down onto the metal table with a sound like thunder. The impact echoed through the chamber like a gunshot. Veltar's crystalline features cracked against the metal surface, rainbow fragments scattering across the table as the fleet commander struggled weakly against Jake's grip. "The most dangerous thing on that Deathworld," Jake said in a voice that carried to every corner of the now silent chamber, "is us." The chamber erupted into chaos as Fleet Commander Veltar struggled against Jake's iron grip on his crystalline head crest. Rainbow fragments from the damaged alien's face scattered across the metal table while his long arms flailed helplessly. The Zephyrian guards reached for their weapons, but Kevin had already moved with the deadly speed that came from years of special operations training. The first guard never saw Kevin coming. One moment he was drawing his energy weapon, the next he was unconscious on the floor with Kevin standing over him holding the alien's sidearm. The second guard managed to clear his holster before Kevin's elbow caught him in what passed for a throat-on. Zephyrian anatomy, dropping him beside his partner, Jake held Veltar pinned against the table. The fleet commander's struggles growing weaker as shock set in. Around the chamber, the representatives of conquered species pressed themselves against the walls, their faces showing terror unlike anything they had experienced since joining the Zephyrian Empire. "Every single one of you surrendered the moment." These crystalline bullies showed up with bigger ships and better technology, Jake said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber as he addressed the alien representatives. "You saw their superior numbers and decided that survival meant submission." The gray-skinned Callousy representative tried to speak, his voice shaking. "Captain Miller, you do not understand the power of the Empire. Resistance only leads to destruction and death." Jake turned his head to look at the terrified alien while maintaining his grip on Veltar. "Destruction and death, that's what you're afraid of." He smiled, and the expression sent chills through every non-human in the room. "Let me show you something about the species you thought needed rescuing." With his free hand, Jake activated his communication device. The chamber's holographic displays, previously used to show Earth's dangers, now came alive with new images transmitted directly from human databases. But these were not the disaster footage and wildlife attacks the Zephyrians had compiled. These were scenes of human recreation and entertainment. The first image showed a human throwing himself from a perfectly good aircraft, plummeting toward the ground at terminal velocity with nothing but a fabric parachute to save his life. The aliens watched in horror as the human waited until the last possible second before deploying his chute, whooping with joy as he landed safely. "This is what we do for fun," Jake explained conversationally, as if he were not holding an alien. Fleet commander face down on a table. "We call it skydiving. Humans pay money to experience the terror of falling to their deaths." The display shifted to show humans climbing vertical rock faces thousands of feet above the ground, their lives depending on thin ropes and metal spikes hammered into stone cracks. Some climbed without any safety equipment at all, relying purely on their strength and skill to avoid falling to their deaths. Veltar made a weak sound that might have been protest or pain. Jake loosened his grip slightly but did not release the fleet commander. "That's mountain climbing. Another human recreational activity. We do it because the mountain is there and because falling would kill us." The next series of images showed human extreme sports that made the alien representatives gasp and moan in distress. Humans surfing waves tall enough to crush buildings, racing motorcycles at speeds that would liquefy their bodies in a crash, diving into caves filled with water where a wrong turn meant drowning in absolute darkness. "Storm chasing," Jake continued. as the display showed humans driving vehicles directly toward massive tornadoes. We track the most destructive weather patterns on our planet and get as close as possible to them. Not to escape or hide, but to study them and experience their power firsthand. The blue-skinned Titanian representative was making sounds of distress. This is madness. Why would any rational being seek such danger? Because we're not rational, Jake replied. We're apex predators from a Deathworld, and danger makes us feel alive. The display now showed human military training exercises that made the previous images look tame by comparison. Soldiers running through obstacle courses designed to break bones and tear muscles, practicing combat techniques that assumed they would be outnumbered and outgunned, learning to fight and win in conditions that would kill most alien species. Instantly, Kevin had moved to secure the chamber's other exits, moving with casual efficiency that demonstrated exactly the kind of training the aliens were now watching on the displays. 2 more guards lay unconscious in his wake, and the remaining Zephyrian security personnel were backing away from him with obvious fear. Your research was very thorough, Jake said to Veltar, whose crystalline features were slowly regenerating, but still showed the cracks from impact with the table. You cataloged all the ways our world tries to kill us. The storms, the predators, the temperature extremes, the geological instability, but you made one critical error in your analysis. The holographic displays now showed scenes that made the alien representatives cry out in terror. Humans running into burning buildings to rescue complete strangers, diving into churning floodwaters to save drowning victims, charging toward explosions and disasters when every instinct should have told them to flee. You assumed we were victims of our environment, Jake continued. Desperate survivors driven mad by the constant struggle to stay alive on an impossible world. You saw us risking our lives to help others and thought it was evidence of psychological damage. The display shifted to show human children engaged in activities that would traumatize adult aliens. Young humans learning to swim in waters that could drown them, playing contact sports that regularly caused injuries, competing in activities where failure meant pain and embarrassment, but where victory brought glory. But we don't help others because we're desperate, Jake explained. We help others because that's what apex predators do when they're part of the same pack. We don't risk our lives because we're crazy. We risk our lives because the alternative is letting our people die, and that's not acceptable. Around the chamber, the representatives of conquered species were beginning to understand something that filled them with a new kind of terror. These humans were not victims seeking rescue. They were not broken beings driven to madness by their harsh world. They were the most dangerous predators their galaxy had ever produced, and they had just realized that someone was threatening their pack. The display now showed human space missions, but not the primitive technology the Zephyrians had mocked. Earlier, these were images of humans working in the vacuum of space with minimal protection, conducting repairs on stations orbiting gas giants where the radiation would cook most alien species, exploring asteroid fields where a single mistake would mean death in the cold and airless void. Our elderly survive conditions that would kill your young, Jake said, his voice taking on the tone of a teacher explaining simple facts to slow students. Our children play games that would traumatize your warriors, our disabled and injured. Find ways to contribute that would inspire your greatest heroes. Fleet Commander Veltar tried to lift his head, his voice weak but still carrying the authority of command. Captain Miller, you are making a grave mistake. The Empire's response to violence will be swift and overwhelming. Jake finally released his grip on the fleet commander's head crest, allowing the tall alien to straighten up slowly. Veltar's crystalline features were still cracked, and rainbow fluid that might have been blood dripped from the damaged areas onto the metal table. Violence, Jake repeated thoughtfully. Let me tell you about violence, Fleet Commander. Fleet Commander Veltar stood unsteadily beside the metal table, rainbow fluid still dripping from his cracked crystalline features as he tried to regain his composure and authority. Around the chamber, his guards lay unconscious while Kevin stood casually near the main exit, holding multiple alien weapons with the relaxed confidence of someone who knew exactly how to use them. Violence, Jake repeated, his voice carrying a dangerous calm that made every alien in the chamber take an involuntary step backward. You want to talk about the Empire's response to violence? That's interesting because I've been thinking about violence too. The holographic displays around the chamber shifted once more, but now they showed something that made Veltar's damaged features go completely still with shock. The images were not from Earth's databases this time. They were real-time feeds from Zephyrian space, showing detailed scans of Zephyrian military installations, fleet positions, and defensive systems. You see, Fleet Commander, while you were spending years studying Earth from a distance and planning your conquest, did you really think we weren't studying you right back? The first image showed a Zephyrian shipyard in what the aliens had believed was a heavily protected inner system. But the scan was impossibly detailed, showing not just the exterior of the facility but internal layouts, production schedules, and even the personal quarters of the workers. Someone had been inside that facility with advanced recording equipment. Veltar's voice cracked as he spoke. Impossible. Our borders are impenetrable. No primitive species has the technology to penetrate Imperial space undetected. Jake smiled, and the expression sent fresh waves of terror through the assembled aliens. Primitive, that's an interesting word choice. He gestured toward the displays, which now showed tactical analysis of Zephyrian fleet formations with detailed assessments of their strengths and weaknesses. Your ships are impressive, Jake acknowledged. Faster than ours, better armed, more advanced in almost every way. But they have one critical flaw that your engineers never considered. The display zoomed in on the crystalline hull of a Zephyrian warship, highlighting specific structural points with red targeting indicators. They were designed by a species that thinks defensively. Every system is built to protect the ship and crew from outside threats. Energy shields, armored hulls, automated defense systems, all focused on keeping danger away from the people inside. Kevin had moved to a position where he could watch all the exits, while keeping his weapons trained on the remaining conscious guards. His movements were so fluid and natural that he seemed completely relaxed, but every alien in the room could sense the deadly violence waiting just beneath his calm exterior. But humans don't think defensively, Jake continued. We think like predators. When we see a fortified position, we don't wonder how to defend against it. We figure out how to get inside it and kill everything there. The display now showed images. That made Veltar stagger backward in disbelief. Humans in stealth suits moving through Zephyrian facilities, planting monitoring devices, and mapping security systems. The footage was time-stamped, showing that these infiltrations had been happening for months while the Zephyrians planned their conquest of Earth. Your impenetrable borders, Jake said conversationally, have more holes than a fishing net? We've been walking through your territory like we owned it, cataloging your defenses, studying your tactics, and identifying every single weakness in your military structure. The gray-skinned Kalasi representative made a choking sound. How many of you are out there? Jake's smile widened. That's classified information. But I will tell you this, the new frontier isn't an exploration vessel. It's a reconnaissance ship, one of many. The holographic displays shifted to show star charts of the local galactic region, but now they were marked with human intelligence assessments rather than Zephyrian territorial claims. Red indicators showed military installations that had been compromised. Yellow marks indicated facilities under surveillance, and green markers showed potential staging areas for human operations. Fleet Commander Veltar tried to salvage some authority from the situation. Even if your people have conducted espionage operations, you are still vastly outnumbered. The Empire controls hundreds of star systems with thousands of ships. Your entire species could not match our military strength. Jake nodded thoughtfully. You're absolutely right about the numbers. Your fleet could probably destroy every human ship in open battle. Your armies could overwhelm our ground forces through sheer mass. If this were a conventional war between civilized species, you would win easily. The admission seemed to give Veltar some confidence back, though his cracked features still leaked rainbow fluid. Then you understand the futility of resistance? Surrender now, and your people can still benefit from Imperial protection and guidance. But here's the thing about humans, Jake said, his voice dropping to the dangerous tone that had preceded his assault on the fleet commander. We don't fight conventional wars against civilized opponents. We fight like the apex predators we are. The holographic displays now showed detailed intelligence on Zephyrian civilian infrastructure. Power generation facilities, food production centers, transportation hubs, communication networks, all mapped and analyzed with surgical precision. But more disturbing were the personnel files, showing detailed information about individual Zephyrians, including their families, daily routines, and personal vulnerabilities. Your military might be impressive, Jake acknowledged, but your civilians are soft and unprotected. They've never faced an enemy that targets non-combatants because your previous opponents were civilized species that followed rules of warfare. The blue-skinned Titanian representative was backing toward the chamber's far wall, his forearms trembling. You would attack innocent civilians, that is barbaric beyond comprehension. Jake's expression hardened. Innocent. You want to talk about innocent? He gestured toward the displays, which now showed images of human cities and civilian populations. You came to our star system planning to relocate our entire species whether we wanted it or not. You were going to break up human families, destroy our cultures, and force our children to grow up as imperial subjects on worlds they never chose. Kevin spoke for the first time since entering the chamber, his voice carrying the flat tones of someone reporting tactical assessments. Intelligence indicates the Empire's standard relocation protocol separates family groups to prevent cultural resistance. Children under 10 are placed in Imperial education facilities and have no further contact with their birth parents. The statement sent a chill through the chamber that had nothing to do with temperature. Every alien present suddenly understood that they were not dealing with desperate refugees or even conventional enemies. They were facing a species that viewed the planned destruction of human families as an act of war deserving total retaliation. So, here's our counteroffer, Jake said, walking over to the scattered fragments of the surrender documents and grinding them under his boot. You turn your ships around right now and leave human space. You forget you ever found Earth, and you never come back? In exchange, we'll pretend this conversation never happened. Veltar tried to reassert his authority one more time. And if, the Empire refuses your demands, Jake's smile returned cold and predatory. Then we'll show you why apex predators from a Deathworld don't make good slaves. We'll turn your perfect crystalline cities into hunting grounds. We'll make your civilians afraid to leave their homes. We'll teach your children to check under their beds for monsters. Because the monsters will be real and they'll be coming for everyone who supported this invasion. The chamber fell completely silent except for the sound of Veltar's labored breathing and the soft drip of rainbow fluid hitting the metal table. Every alien present could sense the absolute certainty in Jake's voice, the calm confidence of someone who had already planned every detail of the war he was describing. Finally, Jake activated his communicator. New Frontier, this is Captain Miller. Prepare for immediate departure. Negotiations are concluded. Lisa's voice came back clear and professional. Understood, Captain. Transport ready on your signal. Jake looked around the chamber one last time, his gaze lingering on each of the terrified alien representatives. I suggest you all think very carefully about what you've learned here today. The galaxy just got a lot more dangerous. The transport beam engulfed Jake and Kevin, dissolving them back to energy as they returned to their ship. In the silence that followed, Fleet Commander Veltar slowly reached for his communication controls to contact the Zephyrian fleet. His message was brief and decisive. All ships, withdraw immediately. Return to Imperial space and await further orders. As the New Frontier jumped to faster-than-light speeds and disappeared into the void, the aliens in the chamber began to understand that the balance of power in their galaxy had just shifted. Forever. Humanity had introduced itself not as refugees seeking salvation, but as the most dangerous predators the universe had ever seen.